So welcome everyone. We appreciate your time today. We are privileged to have with us today Florida's Chief Financial Officer, Jimmy Patronis. He has been in the seat now for, is this going on 4 years? Are we close?
Yeah, this is so this June 30th will be 3 full years. So then it'll start the fourth. Yeah, start the fourth.
Time flies when you're having fun. Well,
right.
We greatly appreciate you being with us today. There's a lot of folks on the line here from the Daytona Regional Chamber membership that are, very concerned about what's going on in the state right now and how the state's reacting to it and how COVID is affecting the state and our general financial health. So we hoped you could give us a little insight on that and then the road going forward a little bit on how the state's going to deal with things like business liability related to COVID.
Sure. So, well, look, thank you for having me. And for all of y'all that don't know, Zane Beard, Zane is on the line too. Most of you know Zane. He makes the rounds. He's got a pretty good territory to cover, but I think the world of the guy. He's just a superstar. I tried to drag him to Tallahassee, but he's got a significant other down there that just doesn't want to leave Central Florida. So anyway, I appreciate everything he does as a program manager. He's actually got more tenure at Department of Financial Services than I do. So he was something that I inherited from Jeff Atwater. But look, it's great to join y'all. Thank you for everything you do. And most of y'all know my hometown is Panama City, Florida, and a lot of the same similarities and dependence we have on the economy of Northwest Florida is very similar to what's in the backyard of Daytona Beach. And as I was super concerned, I came from a family restaurant business after 30 years, did some time in the legislature, but I grew up in a service industry environment. I understood the value of taking care of the customer, but what's really important is understanding that the cash flow of what we have in the state, over 70%, is tourism service related, hospitality. When we throw that big of a chunk of our revenues coming from the tourism industry, it's very concerning with what we saw, what COVID-19 has done to us. We started making the rounds back in February. I get to be the state fire marshal also. So we made trips to fire stations all over the state back in February saying, what is your pandemic plan? And as we were kind of going with, a concern that, maybe COVID would be a effect, but in good measure, let's reach out to the fire departments, having no idea that we would see the type of catastrophic, crippling effect COVID has had to the state's employment system, to the state's economy, and to the state's small businesses. As Governor DeSantis has been leading, I admire, that what he's had to do. He's had to make some very tough decisions, measured decisions, where you've got COVID, where and some arguments has become very political. Some has still become very much a consumer health issue. And then you go and you throw the economic consequences that COVID has done. What are some things that we've seen that's happened in Florida since? So the CARES Act has been passed by Congress. Most of y'all already know that. $5.9 billion of the CARES Act is sitting in my state's checkbook. I get to be the treasurer for the state of Florida. So the monies are there. It's got some strings attached to it, and it's not dollars that can be just used for anything. So as those dollars are there, Congress has been in an impasse for several months now. And when you got Nancy Pelosi calling President Trump morbidly obese, the likelihood of those guys coming together to try to iron out some differences when it comes to real life issues in our communities, it's unfortunate. There has been some movement and dialogue that Congress will enact probably an infrastructure plan. And where we get with an infrastructure plan coming out of Congress, it's not a reoccurring financial obligation for the federal government. So it's a way to address some needs, put some priorities and get people back to work. And at the same time, not create a new program that ultimately we'll have to fund as taxpayers. So, all these are challenges out there. And then you've seen where the majority leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, has been very adamant that whatever may develop from Congress moving forward as another round of stimulus, flexibility, you name it, he is demanding some type of COVID liability. that is of interest to me. Specifically, I get to regulate insurance fraud in the state of Florida. I've lived through 3 different hurricanes that have hit the state of Florida since having this job, and we run all consumer services when it comes to insurance claims. So incredibly important to me, but also it's one of those issues that you can't allow this pandemic to be exploited by bad players that are trying to, take a bad situation, especially when small businesses are doing everything they can to abide by CDC guidelines, Department of Health guidelines, best practices, some going above and beyond. They're already working on tight margins. They're already working on reduced capacity. They're already investing money in greater types of protections in order to make their businesses safe. And then you get a gut punch coming in with a group that has found this crack that they can exploit and ultimately bring a series of potential lawsuits. So, doing nothing is not an option. We are starting dialogues with our legislative leaders. There's some policy ideas that are bouncing around. Senator Jeff Brandes out of the St. Pete area is interested in picking up this fight with us. In addition, you've got members of the legislature that are running, their former House members with a former Representative Jim Boyd and former Representative Danny Burgess, both of which will be good advocates. And in addition, you've got your own fantastic, Jeannie and powerhouse in your backyard with Tom Leake. Tom is a fantastic legislator, is focused on some of these issues. So as we kind of, bring all these resources together, small businesses are the backbone of our state. We've got to make sure the small businesses are being successful. We need to make sure that government is being supportive of these small businesses. Now, let me give you some numbers with you, and then I really want to kind of just, back off and let you ask questions. We have seen an outpouring of money that has left the state's trust funds when it comes to our unemployment trust fund. So the state has had over 2.5 million unemployment claims. There's been billions of dollars that have been paid out as a combination of the $600 that has come from the federal government and the $275 that's come from the state government. Well, all those $275 checks that leave the state's coffers are leaving our state's trust funds. Over $1 billion has left. So one of the things that we've been advocating for out of my office is, and I know it's not real sensational, but you know what? Again, I keep on putting my small business hat on. When we deplete that unemployment trust fund, the way we replenish it is through the backs and raising fees on our own small businesses. So the argument that my office has been making, we've sent letters to Secretary Mnuchin saying, hey, we want to use CARES Act dollars to replenish those trust funds because this is a pandemic that we had no control over, and we feel like that's justified use of the dollars you've sent us. That guidance has been issued. We will be able to use those. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to kick small businesses while they're already down and trying to recover. So that is one positive that we've seen. And we also seen some greater flexibility from the administration when it comes to how CARES Act dollars can be used for helping our first responders. Challenging times. The governor has just received the budget yesterday. The budget that he has received, about $93 billion. It was kind of a pre-COVID-19 budget. The budget was passed in late February and finalized in early March, and we shut down the state in mid-March. So the epidemic had not reached the proportions of shutting down the way we did in the month of April. So as the governor has been laser focused on the recovery of our state, the protection of our citizens, at the same time the budget was sitting there, and both parties, it was a public document. So, the governor was sitting there focused on the budget, or his team was, as he was focused on the safety of our citizens, and the legislature was there being there for answering questions. Well, a lot of those questions have been considered. The governor came out and had a press conference day before yesterday, and he alluded to being pretty potentially heavy-handed with the veto pen. And I think, those decisions he's going to have to make are not going to be taken lightly. But the economy and the stress that our businesses and our state's revenues are seeing have been devastated. We've lost over $2 billion in sales tax revenue in just 2 months. And as we build a budget every year, as the legislature builds that budget every year, it's a balanced budget. because the Constitution forces us to do it. So as we build that balanced budget, it's also as anticipating revenues that to create it. Well, when you throw COVID into the mix, and that estimation did not factor in losing billions of dollars in revenues, it ultimately is going to affect next year's budget. So we've got our work cut out for us. And as my mother is trying to call, sorry, y'all, let me hit end. Sorry, Mom. We're going to see, you know, what he ultimately feels like the state needs to operate. And I think between that, Congress probably meeting again in late July with some direction and guidance, maybe expanding what can happen with the CARES Act dollars, we will recover and get through this year. Moody's and Standard & Poor's issued some guidance early this week. They're hitting the pause button on forecasting right now, simply because of so many unknowns. The state's still maintaining a AAA bond rating. We still have good fiscal health in the state, but when we have had a setback, it's just like you know Daytona Beach. Y'all lost Easter. We lost Easter in Northwest Florida. We count on Easter as a huge revenue source for our businesses that ultimately end up being the state's economy.
Daytona Chamber that's putting this on?
Yeah. What's this guy
So,
doing?
Anyhow,
Actually moved one.
Let me pause with that, and guys, if there's any questions I can answer, I'd be more than happy to.
Well, we have had a few questions, and I would encourage the group, if you haven't already, put your questions in the chat room, and we'll get to as many as we can. One of the first ones is from Bob Lloyd, and I think it's a good one that most of us are concerned with. It says, if we are able to pass essential tort immunity legislation, how can we get it to apply retroactively to lawsuits that have already been filed or pending as of the next legislative session?
You know, that's going to be tough. And Bob, thanks for that question. We have got a legislature, and they're made up of very good citizens. I think they're all incredibly laser focused on doing right by their districts. But we got to hold them accountable. You know, you got to hold me accountable. I agree with what you're saying. As we have seen, I was talking to our folks. The state has kind of like our own insurance company called Citizens. In the month of April, we did see a downtick in litigation. But here's what's happening. Where you have a downtick in litigation, every business was affected, including plaintiffs' firms that are in this arena. But as they are effectively having a downtick because people were locked in their houses, the last thing they were going to do is take solicitations from people they don't know to come into their house and do any type of sales pitch, inspection, what have you. So there is bottled up energy in that industry to pounce. This is no different than what we're seeing right now in both your market and our market. We've seen a lot of pent up demand of people that miss the beaches, and thank God that there are visitors from other parts of the states and in the Southeast United States that want to cut down. So this same type of call to action, where the tourism industry wants to do everything they can to get back to business, so do those that ultimately potentially drive up the cost of doing business. So it's incredibly critical that we stay very active. You got to hold your legislators accountable. You can't just make one trip to Tallahassee and feel like you've checked the box. When we get legislation filed, it's got to become a priority of both legislative chambers. And you know, your former congressman, our governor, is going to be key to this. We've got to make sure he has an appetite for wanting to do this. And you know, right now his plate's full, and the legislature is not meeting. So again, some of these things are probably not as front burner issues. But in my world, I feel like I've got to take every moment I can to educate people and hopefully have them so passionate about it that they want to step up and be part of the solution making process. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. We have another one. This is from Terry King Tyler, and this was about kind of putting on your legislative hat again. Do you anticipate that the trust funds agencies like FDOT and others the trust funds will be rated by the legislature to give to other agencies? And the second part of that is, would FDOT then have to postpone projects?
So here's the reality there. Term limits exist in the Florida legislature. I'm one of the few guys that was around. I'm kind of embarrassed to say because that means tells you how long I've been in the process. I was one of the few guys over there in the last downturn of the economy we had back in 09, 10. The budgets that we were passing then definitely rated trust funds. We were having a catastrophic time financially. The state as the construction foreclosure industry definitely showed its strength to our economy, but also without it, the weakness in our state's revenues. I think everything's on the table, and I hate to make you feel threatened by that, but this is where the legislature and I don't want to bail out in Illinois. I don't want to bail out of California with Florida taxpayers' dollars because of bad decisions they made in their pensions and other things that they made at a state level. Because, and just give you a little comparison, the state of New York has fewer people than the state of Florida. I think we all know that. The state of New York has an annual budget of over $150 billion. The budget this year that the state of Florida sent to the governor was about $93 billion. The state of New York has existing debt obligations of over $150 billion. The state of Florida has debt obligations of about $20 billion. So we are in a great position. Now, again, the state of New York also has multiple different types of revenue sources that come into their coffers, whether it be a state income tax, different fees, different structures. In Florida, we have definitely created a low tax environment. Now, still, I was talking to a developer from Southwest Florida day before yesterday. He's still selling 15 houses a week. So there is a migration that's taking place of people that are leaving high tax states, moving to low tax states. You've got developments in your own backyard that are seeing good movement. That housing construction movement is good for our state's economy. And you think about every stud, every faucet, every can of paint that's bought, there'll be sales tax. The state will pick up its commission on it. As those commissions are being paid to the state of Florida, then they go into the payroll systems of paying the framers, the plumbers, the electricians, the realtors, you name it. I saw Robert Campbell's online. He's my former college roommate. Hey, Robert. But as you've got all those players that feed off of this state's economic engine, those also help protect the trust funds that you brought up your concerns with. But again, you get the government you deserve if you don't engage it, and you've got to be part and be active when Tallahassee makes the decisions that will affect us financially.
Good. I'm looking here, a couple other questions. Are there any updates on the state's efforts to attract healthcare manufacturing companies returning from overseas, in addition to aerospace? And a little off of your tact, but I'm sure you have some information.
Well, look, I think we are very fortunate what our backyard has been able to achieve with SpaceX and Blue Origin, and as these businesses are starting to relocate on our Atlantic coast and starting employment, they've definitely created a real buzz and enthusiasm. I was talking to one of the assistant administrators at NASA the other day, and I was saying, how are you dealing with the demand on workforce? Are you struggling? And the good thing about it is there's an enthusiasm that's been created over there that has become a magnet. It is drawing people that want to be part of that industry, and it's been a good thing. So we're replenishing a workforce with individuals that are moving from other parts of the country into Florida in order to try to seek those jobs. But saying that, I think most of us that were paying attention didn't realize how the non-essential surgeries that were banned because of COVID-19, how crippling having those non-essential surgeries stop, how critical that was to the cash flow of our hospitals. Now look, those non-essential surgeries, a lot of them were covered by Medicaid, a lot of them were covered by Medicare. Both of those are funded by our taxpayers' dollars. So the knee replacements, the hip replacements, all those that were funded by those programs, those were a lot of the surgeries that were put on hold. So, I mean, there's been a real, I would say, correction to the healthcare supply chain, the healthcare industry, not just in the state of Florida, but nationally. I think there's probably going to be a revisiting based on the capacity and demands and an evaluation. My own niece, she's a physician's assistant, and she went from working full time to working, 1 day a week. So again, as those demands get built back up, I think there'll be some real evaluations on the type of needs we have in the state. And, I would think that most of those businesses that depend on those elective surgeries are probably going to really reevaluate their business model to streamline them as much as they can, because if another COVID-19 happens, they don't want to have the financial duress they had. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a hospital administrator for the biggest hospital in Dallas, Texas. There's a surgery center there that had a payroll of $500,000 a month, an outpatient surgery center. Well, when they're not, and they're keeping their employees employed, but they only can do it for so long. So, I mean, there was a reality that set into that business like it's never seen before.
Well, we've got a question here that I think, affects pretty much everybody on the call and then some. The question is it sufficient protection for a business if I have each of the employees, the vendors, the patrons sign a COVID-19 specific waiver, releasing them from any and all liability, responsibility, and obligation around, or should they contract the virus at a later date? And is there any thoughts on that?
I don't think that's going to be enough protection. You're going to have you will still have clever attorneys who will say, oh, well, you signed this without the advice of an attorney. Did you realize what you were signing? I think without some protection in place, with some thoughtful tort litigation, tort legislation. Then and even one of the arguments I've floated out there is even let's take whatever we propose and put a 4-year sunset on it, a 3-year sunset. Let the new norms of COVID-19 moving forward with the technology. There's been all types of technology that have been introduced into our lives now because of COVID-19. I'm talking to you over Zoom. I never had Zoom downloaded on my phone before. So you've got all these new, ways of ensuring that businesses are safer. But you're ultimately going to see challenges also to a number of industries. Large sporting events, conventions. The convention business down in Orlando, it's been devastated. I was on I-Drive a couple of weeks ago, and it looked like a zombie apocalypse. I mean, there was nobody on the sidewalks. There was nobody in the buildings. Everything was closed, and it was 11 o'clock in the morning. So, I mean, these challenges that our state and our country have faced because of COVID-19 have had just a disastrous effect on our economies and our jobs. And I really don't think you won't see a pause moving forward. You're just going to see greater preparations by businesses and investments by businesses. And if it gets to the point where every single restaurant does a thermometer check of every guest before they walk in, in order to achieve some of this protection, well, that's what we may have to do. But, signing a document that releases you from any liability, I wouldn't hold your breath on it. It's a start. It's something that you can use, I guess, if you do get sued. But I hear horrible stories of small businesses getting sued by these lawsuit mills where they literally I've got a dear friend of mine who lost his restaurant in a fire. He then comes back, he cobbles together some resources, and he opens up in a storefront of a shopping center that's 50 years old. And the next thing you know, he gets slapped with a lawsuit, because his bathroom in this 50-year-old building is not ADA compliant. I mean, what did this guy do to deserve another kick in the head over, a building that he doesn't own, as he's just trying to make ends meet, and, some lawsuit mill out of God knows where, slaps him with a 500-page document. It's unfortunate, but if you give me, $5,000, I'll get off your front doorstep and I'll go to my next, solicitation that I've dropped through the mail. So don't get me started.
Understood. I think we talked a little bit about this, but the state deficit, and we still, obviously through this, we'll have to have a balanced budget in the state of Florida. That won't change, correct?
Correct. So here, that's constitutional. And so I'm going to give you some bad news. So the state of Florida, we had $2 billion in what we call a rainy day fund. And what that basically is, that's $2 billion that the legislature said, we're not going to spend this money. This is $2 billion that we're going to roll forward for a future legislature just in case something happens. Well, that $2 billion is gone. Okay. So all the sales tax revenue, we lost almost what, 2.8 billion dollars in sales tax revenue March, April, and May. That's not including what we're going to lose in June. So you throw that in the mix, you throw the fact that we've lost our corporate income tax for those periods. We've got a hole to dig ourselves out of. Now, we have burned through those reserves. This has been a disaster. It is being used for the reasons why we have it. I hate using it, but it is what it is. Now, what we're going to have to do is be able to make those necessary steps and saving money to be able to build that reserve back up. You know, but the plus side is we still have a state with low taxes. We still have a state that people are moving to. And as people continue to move to this state, all that equates to, you know, basically having a restaurant that's got a lot of volume. You know, I can run a real tight ship, but if the people are lined up out the door, it's a blessing. It's a blessing that they're coming in, they're spending money, and it's helping me, you know, erase, you know, concerns I have with liabilities I have financially.
Understood. We have one last question, I think, unless I see another here shortly. But any thoughts on how the state's going to support public education as they prepare for the upcoming school year, and how has that impacted what you're doing? Sure.
So the CARES Act dollars had I forgot how many hundreds of millions of dollars in that package that was specifically for K-12. There was another portion of it that was specifically for higher ed. You know, there's another portion of it that is specifically for metropolitan cities that are over 500,000. So there have been pots of money that came down to the CARES Act that went straight to the school districts. Those are out there to assist. You know, the one thing that folks aren't talking about, and I'm putting my Captain Anderson's restaurant operation hat on. When my restaurant's not open, I still have you know, obligations. You know, I still have to pay a power bill, but you know what? My power bill's not as big. I'm not using any natural gas because I'm not cooking. You know, there's expenses that my business did not have because I wasn't operational. You know, if you look at, you know, the school district in the hometown I grew up, it was spending about, its budget was basically $1 million a day. Well, when the schools aren't being occupied, there's overhead and expenses that they're not putting out. So, you know, I haven't, you know, asked personally, but I'm just asking as a parent, you know, that has kids in public school, you know, I haven't approached my superintendent, but tell me, you know, what type of drop in expenses did you have since schools were shut down? Because I'm sure there were still expenses that they had to make, but I'm sure there was also expenses that didn't get made. So anyway, I think the jury's still out. I think you won't really know of what type of threat financially K-12 is having until we look at what type of investments K-12 might have to make in order to ensure that their schools are safe. And oh, by the way, those same schools are the same buildings that we use for hurricane shelters in this state a lot also. So that is another challenge that we're having. And we just approved last week at Cabinet our shelter plan for the state of Florida. And granted, we've got a need to have smaller shelters for people that might have vulnerable health conditions. So, you know, it never stops, but I do still enjoy my job more than I thought I would. You know, and the cool thing I got about it is if you haven't visited fltreasurehunt.com, or fltreasurehunt.gov.com, both come the same place. I think last time I was with Jim Cameron, I was plugging this. But if you go and you check out that website, we pumped out over $25 million just in the month of April alone in unclaimed property. So that's, you know, put in your name, your business name, a business that you own, your loved one, your mom, your dad. Go check it out. I don't need your social security number. I don't need any of that. Just simply put your name and just start a blanket search from there. And then you can add more details to zero in. But, you know, we were giving out American Express gift cards. We were giving out uncashed paychecks. We're giving out utility deposits. You know, we're giving out money, and it's not mine, it's yours. So. Well, appreciate that. One last, I think, as we move forward, you know, consumer confidence is key to moving the economy forward. I mean, people have to feel comfortable, and that will help obviously raise the sales tax dollars that the state needs to get through this. But how do we, as a chamber and as a business, how do we filter all of these reports that are coming into us? I mean, we're getting blindsided every which way from increasing numbers and what does that mean? And, you know, and then, you know, we hear from time to time the possible retraction of,
safe opening and, moving back from a phase 2 to phase 1, that type of thing. How does it, as a business, what is your best advice to someone who's, sitting in the middle of this and just trying to figure it out?
Well, I got to be on the governor's executive committee for the Reopen Florida Task Force. So again, heard a lot of testimony, concerns came forward as we're starting to do this phased opening. I think the governor has tried to be as responsible to the citizens' health of the state of Florida, the visitors' health of the state of Florida, but at the same time, understanding that we've got to allow business to open back up. Me personally, if I'm handicapping the landscape, I think going back to a phase 1 is not going to happen. I think you're going to be, continue to move forward, and our businesses, it's just like anything else. If I had 2 restaurants next to each other and one of them had air conditioning and one didn't, and in the middle of summer, which one of them I'm gonna probably go eat it? I'm gonna go eat it the one that invested in air conditioning. This is gonna be no different. This is as those businesses are out there and they will promote, they will go on the radio, they'll go on social media, and they will, explain to the public what we're doing in order to make sure that our customers are safe when they dine with us. This is no different. I think as you've seen, I've seen with car dealers, and the manufacturers, have gone out and said, we've got, contactless delivery of your new automobile. This is what businesses do. We go out and we try to innovate in order to build consumer confidence again. So, it's no different what y'all are going to do at the Speedway Corporation. The Great American Races have got to start back up. We have got to be able to allow people to lose themselves in the enthusiasm of NASCAR and what happens as our communities come back together and we focus on things in life that are important. And if there's one thing that COVID has done, I think for a lot of us is, it's definitely made me appreciate family a little bit differently. It also makes me sometimes wish I had a cage to put my children in because of the challenges that they pose. And you know what does it do? It makes you realize how much you appreciate public schools, or you appreciate, the ability you've got to show up to work, do a job, somebody else is educating your children, and then you come back together. So there has been so many life experiences that have been reintroduced to our whole state and our nation through COVID-19. I don't want to relive it. I don't think any of us do, but again, I think it's going to be incumbent on us to do whatever we need to do to make our businesses a success.
Well, thank you very much for spending the time with all of us today. We greatly appreciate your time and certainly your efforts on behalf of the state of Florida and all of us. It's very much appreciated.
Well, y'all please let me know if there's anything I could do. What's crazy is so there's been definitely a lot more eyeball time on our devices. And so, Sunday I'm here at the house with Katie and the boys, and I'm flipping through Facebook, and I'm getting like bombarded with, and I was going to tell Zane or Jim this because I don't have my contact in Costa, but I'm getting bombarded on Facebook page for all these $30 pairs of Costa glasses. And I'm thinking, there's no way that these are real, Costa Del Mars, for $30 a pair. I just want to remind people, when I saw that ad, okay, if it's too good to be true, it is. The scams that have been introduced into our lives by COVID-19 have been outlandish, but just again, everybody has been affected by this. Every business owner and even the scam artists, they're going to go anything and everything they can do to go above and beyond to try to separate you from your hard-earned dollars. But the upside is, I was talking to car dealers earlier this week, they're having historic sales in automobiles. I was talking to the Budweiser distributor this week. Budweiser typically keeps in their warehouses anywhere about 30 days worth of inventory on hand. They can't even keep 5 days worth of inventory on hand. So the demands on the system of trying to get back to normal, those things make me feel good. The boat dealer I talked to about 2 weeks ago, they know they will not have enough inventory of boats to make it through the summer. So there's definitely people that are spending money. Same thing with RV sales. It's just a different day. People are going to take a different type of vacation. They're going to spend their money a little bit differently. And, it's there. We just need to again, move on, and we're all in this together. Hold me accountable. Come see us in Tallahassee. or otherwise I'll come and bother you in Daytona Beach.
We'd love to have you anytime. Thanks again.